Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. We hope that everyone enjoyed their holiday weekend and was able to spend some time with their loved ones. Tonight, we'll celebrate the holidays with a look back at some of our best shows of 2022. As we have for the past 28 years, we've provided the people of the Bronx with dialogue about the borough's most important topics. So let's get started with the show we did on January 10th. It's even hard to remember what life was like back then as the Omicron variant was spreading. And on Bronx Talk, we brought together a panel of experts to give the Bronx a status update and also advice on how to stay healthy. Dr. Torian Easterling from the city's Department of Health and Mental Hygiene provided just that, giving us more information about the Omicron virus. Take a look.
What we've been hearing for the past several weeks, we are certainly in another surge. We are seeing a high number of cases citywide, as the map has shown. And so what we can say is that this is widespread community transmission. Specifically in the city, we're seeing over 27,000 cases over a 7-day average. We haven't seen the test positivity this high, primarily because of the presence of the Omicron variant, because it is more transmissible. But also, we are doing more tests per capita than anywhere in the world. And so that just really speaks about how widespread the variant is moving. In the Bronx, we're seeing about 3,500 cases per 100,000. Really high transmission when you think about CDC's categorization around transmission. So this just really underscores how important it is that we do all the things that we know can really keep people safe and protect lives.
We hear, and the numbers show, and in fact, the Times had a map recently of hospitals and what ICU capacity is like. It appears there's still 80% filled in the Bronx hospitals, which shows that if we were in this situation way back in the March 2020 or April 2020, we would not be in as, I don't want to say as good a situation, but we would not have even any space in the hospitals. How are the hospitals doing? Are they near capacity? And then we're certainly going to get to the assembly member about staffing and nurses and things like that. But just start in general about capacity for hospitals to deal with these issues, especially in the Bronx. Montefiore, St. Barnabas, Lincoln, you know who they are.
Yeah, absolutely. We're in a different moment. That's the reality. We're certainly in a different moment because we have a high vaccination rate. But the reality is that we are seeing increases in our hospitalization rates across the city, not just one system. And so we are monitoring our healthcare system very closely. Right now, what we can say is that our hospitals are able to handle the patient load currently. But we're going to have to really track this closely. One, because we know that the staffing, that's really important to take care of the patients who are coming in, they themselves are turning out to be positive. And so we're seeing staffing shortages. This is why the mayor announced yesterday the plans for the city to really support our healthcare systems, not only H&H, but also our independent safety net hospitals, because we need to continue with an equity approach and really take care of the neighborhoods that have been hardest hit.
It's even hard to look all the way back there and remember that is when we were just all virtual. Anyway, let's go to our next segment. Redistricting of New York's congressional districts turned out to be one of the most significant stories of the year. As many said, it was largely why 4 Democratic congressional seats turned Republican, thereby giving the GOP control of the House of Representatives. We covered it extensively on Bronx Talk with 2 programs. Here's Ben Weinberg from the Citizens Union from a show we did on redistricting on May 30th. Take a look. So Weinberg, what do you make of that? Are we fortunate or unfortunate in New York? Unfortunate that we had this very difficult, very partisan fight, and then in the long run, it turned out that that, well, it's probably right that we do it this way, even though it's kind of created a ton of confusion for voters. What do you think?
Well, I think we're unfortunate that there is no solution from Washington, D.C., from Congress, and there's no kind of federal across the board solution for redistricting and voting rights and other democracy issues. As Michael has mentioned, unfortunately, the U.S. Supreme Court kind of left it for every state to decide its own redistricting rules. I will say that the one thing that is, I think, often overlooked in the discussion of kind of blue states versus red state and how they redistrict is that in a state like New York, redistricting is not only about how it impacts the composition of the House and the control of Congress, as important as it is, and obviously that gets all the attention with the media or the public. But many times, and in fact, most times in a state like New York, redistricting is about what wing of the party or what candidates gets the nomination of the party. In other words, in most districts, whether it's Congress, state senate, or assembly, it's a question of who will win the primary, who has a shot at winning the primary. So I will say that even if you're a diehard blue Democrat or if you're a left progressive Democrat, you should want to get, even if you want to get back at Republicans, you should seek to have checks and balances and some fairness in the redistricting process. Otherwise, it is manipulated by the people in power to hurt not only the minority party, but also just anyone outside the power center within the majority party.
I think a lot of people could appreciate what you're saying because really what you're talking about is a foundation of real democracy. And with the dialogue in this country, across the country, in New York and everywhere else, we seem to be getting further away from that. Citizen Union put out a release saying that 2 primaries should be condensed to 1 in August. And I believe it was the League of Women Voters that said, you know what, the heck with all of that. Let's do it the way we used to do it and put them all in September. How will the fact that, that's a nice idea, it's not going to happen now. How will the fact that we have the 2 primaries affect voters and affect voter turnout?
Yeah, so that's one of the most unfortunate outcomes of this redistricting chaos. We currently have a June primary for statewide positions, assembly positions, judicial positions, and party positions. And then we have a separate August primary only for the congressional districts and the state senate districts. Now that we know for decades now, we know that recurrent elections reduce turnout. Voters are kind of oversaturated at that point by campaigns, by ads, by political discussions. They sometimes feel like they've done their civic duty in the first election. So we have ample data going back decades on the fact that multiple elections are not in our best interest. Not to mention the fact that they increase costs. Those costs will be will have to be absorbed by local counties, and they burden election officials, campaigns, obviously voters. In New York, we've had 2 primaries in June and in September for a number of years, and we consolidated them. And then we had runoffs in New York City in primaries, and we canceled them as well through the implementation of ranked choice voting. And that was because we realized that 2 primaries or 2 elections, one after another, is bad for turnout, is bad for democracy.
As you know, what we really try to do is do the most important issues that affect the Bronx. And the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade resonated all over the country, and of course in the Bronx as well. We did 2 shows on that, and in July we put together a few experts to talk about what the effect of that historic ruling would be on our home borough of the Bronx. Let's take a look.
Thank you for your question, Gary. We work really upstream. So not to say that, abortion services are not critically important. Abortion is basic health care, and we support women's access to that really critical health care. But we also work with schools across the city to make sure that young people are receiving comprehensive and medically accurate sex education so that young people know, how do you get pregnant? When does pregnancy really begin? Which is not at fertilization, it's at implantation. What is sexual anatomy? What's a healthy relationship? And then connecting all of those young people through middle school and high school, and especially our most vulnerable young people who are in special education schools or District 75 schools, to the services of high quality teen friendly clinics so that they can continue to get access to sexual and reproductive health care, and also be able to ask questions of those medical professionals. So we do work to make sure that young people have all the information and all of the services that they need so that they don't find themselves in a situation where they might need an abortion. The good news that I would say is that we do live in New York State and we do have minors' rights for young people. But, you know, we have to be careful. As Ms. Hoffman said, we have to be proactive because, you know, the impact that the Supreme Court has made could impact our own laws that protect our young people.
You know, I was thinking about this, and maybe it's I don't know, somewhat naive of me to think. I said, does this decision open up a useful dialogue for you to be able to say, because I'm sure especially young people are coming in going, wait a minute, what is this? What is this about? So rather than you or others, of course, I mean you and your colleagues, have to kind of bring up a subject and talk about it, maybe you can kind of say, well, this is what the law is, and now all of a sudden they kind of get informed. And what is that message to girls, young girls specifically, or even young adults, or anybody, really, any women, that you try to deliver so that they don't have unwanted pregnancies or be in a situation where they've got to make what is a very horrible and difficult decision?
And Gary, is that question to me or Ms. Hoffman?
That's for you, Estelle. I really wanted to get your ideas about, you know, does it open up a dialogue that is useful to you and your colleagues to talk to young people and say, well, now wait a minute, let's look at what's going on here.
I mean, it does, Gary, but quite frankly, it opens up a dialogue that starts off from a position of fear. And we don't want young people to be afraid. They are entitled to these rights. They are entitled to these services. So frankly, we'd like to start from a position of like, you know, here's information that is, you know, good for you to have, that allows you to make healthy and informed choices, as opposed to this right has been repealed from most of the millions of women across the country. And, you know, this is what you need to know about it. I think it's important for young people to know, but also know what they are entitled to, which I think is a much more positive, you know, frame of reference and a frame to go forward.
One of the things, well, I just wanted to add one of the things that has come out in this dialogue, and we'll let Ms. Rabboni and then Ms. Hoffman weigh in on it, is the notion, and I was not aware of it till we did a show on this in February, this notion of quote unquote fake clinics that have been set up. We had an advocate on the show in February who said there are more fake clinics than actual abortion clinics in New York City, and maybe in the Bronx. I don't remember the characterization of it. That blew my mind. So, and then this has come out in the media that as part of this effort, there have been people counseling, specifically young girls, but women, all women, to not have an abortion, even if it might not be in their best interest. I mean, so Ms. Rabboni, your thoughts about it, and then Ms. Hoffman about it. You're aware of this, I assume.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, we have information on our website that talks very specifically about crisis pregnancy centers, but I'm glad that you call them fake clinics because that's exactly what they are. They mislead women and girls into thinking that they are an actual clinic, but in actuality, what they are there for is to convince young people and women to not move forward with an abortion. And they're very strategically positioned to actual abortion clinics and health centers that provide abortion care. Right on 149th Street in the South Bronx, across from Planned Parenthood, there is a crisis pregnancy center, and it's been there for years. And very intentionally to mislead young people and young women of color in particular. and it's a travesty.
A consistent theme of Bronx Talk since we began the program back in 1994 is providing access to the borough's elected leaders, in particular, the borough presidents, who have made a habit of appearing on our program. On July 25th, in our first year, Borough President Vanessa Gibson joined us to talk about what should the city do to cite homeless and supportive facilities that we need in the Bronx. What do you want to see from DHS that would work, that would make you say, this is a good location, this is a good facility, I accept this in the Bronx, because obviously we've got to address the problem.
Right. So let me first say that homelessness is a New York City problem and not a Bronx problem. Every community across the city of New York must do their fair share. They must house their own homeless families and single adults that originate from their particular community, but that doesn't always happen. Historically, over many years, there have been certain communities in the Bronx that have historically been saturated, inundated with not just shelters for single adults, for families, safe havens, juvenile facilities, drug treatment programs, an assortment of different programs for people in need. And we don't turn our backs on anyone that is in need, because we know many of these clients have never had a first chance, let alone a second, third, or fourth chance. They are living with addictions and mental health issues, and they need help and they need supportive services. This new administration, under the leadership of Mayor Adams, the Commissioner Gary Jenkins of DHS, has really tried a different approach. So they're looking at neighborhoods that have historically not necessarily had any of these shelters. I think this is about a balance. It's about looking at the neighborhood, the services that will be provided, who the provider is, right? Let's be honest. Some of these providers are shady.
That is certainly one of the issues.
We need to make sure they're
North
credible
Broadway.
and they have a good track record of serving the population, because these are contracts and thousands of dollars that they're being awarded to provide services.
So just to understand, you on one hand you say they should have facilities in the communities that people come from. Originate from. On the other hand, that probably leads to some community saturation. Do you think every neighborhood in the Bronx should kind of pony up and say, look, we understand there's a problem for all of us and we should find space in our community?
I think every neighborhood should at least begin to have those conversations. As I've traveled around the borough, some of the language that I've heard has been unacceptable when people talk about those people thinking that everyone that's homeless is a criminal. Affordable housing equals more crime, and that is far from the case. The majority of homeless families today are employed with a full-time job. They are working class people. They cannot afford the high rents in the Bronx and the city of New York. And guess what? If they could get into a brand new apartment, they would.
I think that would raise the minimum wage question, and I don't think I'm going to bother asking it because, in essence, you've answered it just now. This is so interesting to me, and again, we talked about the Jerome rezoning for years, and we did a number of interviews about it. And then a year ago, you said, after the Jerome rezoning, I don't think I want to do another rezoning. Yet Mayor Adams said he supports rezoning. He said, we're going to be the rezoning city in America. And then, of course, there's the very large controversy in the East Bronx in the Bruckner rezoning. So what do you think? I mean, you like what Mayor Adams said? I know you would support good development, but you don't want to support kind of the difficulties you ran into when you were a council member.
Well, generally, I think we should not call it rezoning. I would like to call it a neighborhood plan, because anytime you are proposing density, changing the zoning, adding new families and people into a community, you need to look at the neighborhood infrastructure, the housing itself, the schools, the parks, the playgrounds, the neighborhood businesses. You need to look at the burden that that particular project may place on a community, particularly those communities that are lower density, those that may have higher density, those that are oversaturated. And so that's why a lot of these projects are often met with a lot of resistance, because people will say the traffic is a nightmare. You can't get to and from schools now. School dismissal time, you can't get through a certain area. We don't have the ability to deal with the infrastructure. And those are legitimate concerns that the city needs to address. What I argued for is an interagency task force of DOT, HPD, DEP, DOE, SCA, a number of organizations that oversee different parts of our city, and getting us all together to talk. So if we're proposing several hundred units for a neighborhood, what is the impact on that local school district, on the parks, on the playgrounds? So these are conversations we should have, honestly, before our proposal happens and not during.
And I know because we talked about it when it happened that Councilmember Salamanca insisted that there be proper studies
Yes.
To assess
Racial
who's
impact
going to
study.
be racial impact studies and who's going to be displaced. What do you think about that Bruckner rezoning that's created such a controversy? I'm going to guess, because you've already said it, some of the dialogue is not very pleasant. And
No, it wasn't.
that's one issue, but that's an aside.
Yeah.
Would you support that proposal as it exists now?
So I already made my recommendations because as a part of the ULURP, the borough president has 30 days. I held 2 hearings, one in person, one remote, and we made our recommendations a few weeks ago. What we did was we are recommending yes with conditions. We want to condense the project. We don't believe an 8-story building in a community of Throgs Neck and Schuylerville that has predominantly been low density of an R4 zoning really would attract and make that beneficial. So what we argued is a lower FAR from 3.3 to 2.2. We reduced the size from 85 feet to 55 feet, 8 stories to 5 stories that would be parallel to the existing school, PS14, that's in the community, because we don't want to we don't want to disrupt the community. We don't want to change the character of the neighborhood. We recognize that 1 and 2 and 3 family home ownership is the way to go, and we encourage that. We made a lot of recommendations. I encourage you to view it because we talked about home ownership. We talked about the interagency task force dealing with coastal resiliency issues, flooding, and so many things that happen to homeowners there. But we also know that it's housing for seniors, older adults, veterans, a youth recreation center, a new supermarket that has 85 jobs.
Check marks. All those you
check,
would support.
check.
One thing that's characterized Bronx Talk over our nearly 3 decades of programming are the debates we've broadcast. In 2022, one of the most competitive races was for the 33rd Senatorial District primary between Miguelina Camillo and the eventual winner, Senator Gustavo Rivera. On August 15th, they answered a question about progressive politics.
We are both seeking to be the Democratic nominees for the seat, and the term of progressive has borne out of the Democratic Party, I believe, to more identify those that are in the left and have become somewhat polarized on certain issues, and it's gotten a negative connotation, which I think the focus really needs to be the political philosophy of inclusion. Being democratic, I would call myself pragmatic, and that's rooted really in who I am. I've never forgotten where I've come from, and I've always been a person of action. So to me, being progressive, I say, yes, I'm progressive, but I am pragmatic more than anything because it's just been my career path. It's been the way that I've worked in the community. And while I want to make sure that we have equality, that we have those democratic values, that we are rising together, my approach is to be pragmatic and thoughtful about it.
Thank you very much. Senator, your thoughts about the word progressive?
Certainly do. It is true that in the last couple of years, it has become quite a charged word. And as most politically charged words, sometimes it kind of lose its meaning. But for me, you could even call me liberal if you'd like. I believe that the state has a responsibility, as in government has a responsibility to folks who are most vulnerable. I think that we have an opportunity in government to make sure that we can make people's lives better, that we can be proactive in that way. And I think that is what progressive is meant to elicit. Someone who believes that government can act aggressively to secure universal health care, to protect people's rights to be in their homes, to make sure that the wealthy pay their fair share. All of these things, I think, fall in line with what has been understood as progressive. Certainly, the work that I've done goes along those lines. So I do not mind being called that, but there's that other word, the liberal word. I actually don't mind that one either.
Just a few weeks ago, in November, BronxTalk was proud to be the first media into the Bronx Children's Museum to provide an exclusive look at what's inside this wonderful new Bronx institution. So there we were in the museum's Beaver Lodge as part of your very first look at the Bronx Children's Museum. I have to be honest with you, this is the first time I have ever been in a beaver hut, and it never occurred to me I ever would be in a beaver hut. Nicole, tell us all about the beaver hut.
Sure. So this is one of the areas where children can come and engage in dramatic play as they play with puppets.
I was going to say, you brought a little friend
I brought a little
with you.
friend. This is Justin the Beaver. Okay, he's one of the unofficial mascots of the Bronx Children's Museum, and he is based off of the real live beavers that were discovered re-inhabiting the Bronx River about 10 years now, 10 years ago now, I guess. So this is our really imaginative play area where children can come, and we have these pretend sticks here. They can pretend to be like little beavers and help contribute to the construction of this lodge.
And so the construction, I guess, I don't know if, Carla, you're the expert on, they make the lodge with sticks, right?
Absolutely. And you can see in the front of the lodge that there's a place for children to actually weave the branches through the other branches so that they can close off the space.
And they can see exactly how it works.
Children really like the enclosed space. It makes them feel like they're in a secret clubhouse. It's a little bit more secluded from the rest of the museum. And there's this really fun video that's playing behind us that was created by a local filmmaker, Leslie Topping, and also stitched together with footage from PBS. And so they're able to come in here and actually get a little glimpse inside a real beaver lodge and see what they do inside, and then they can mimic that out here.
Let's bring our Bronx expert here. Carla, talk to me about why this is so important for children in the Bronx to be here in the woods and experience the building of a beaver lodge and maybe even hanging out here like we're doing today.
Well, first of all, I got to say that we're all kids, right? And your enthusiasm right now is more or less the kind of enthusiasm that we will just be able to jump off of.
I came in here as a talk show host. I'm going out as a child of the Bronx, so let's be clear. So there it is, 2022 on BronxTalk. We want to take this time to thank all of our viewers for being with us for another year, and we look forward to bringing you more Bronx news and updates next year. From our BronxNet family to yours, wishing you all a happy and healthy new year. Also want to take this time to thank producers Rebecca Hemmick and Stephen Powell for their great work through the year, directors Benaya War, Nick Marrero, and Will Guzman, as well as the wonderful production crew who works with us every week. Also to the dozens of guests who joined us this year, and mostly to you, the people of the Bronx, who welcome us into their home each week. Happy holidays to all, and here's to a plentiful and peaceful 2023 in the Bronx. We'll see you next week. Good night.